Hey everyone, I'm here with Katie Halper, who is of TYT Network. She does work on TYT Interviews, great work, just interviewed Zephyr Teachout, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which we're going to touch on. But you can also find the Katie Halper Show, I got it, on SoundCloud, iTunes, Patreon. She's going to do a live taping with Thomas Frank on the 30th, which is next Saturday, and you can go there at Caveat at 21 Clinton Street, New York. So are you pumped about that?
I'm very excited, yeah.
All right, awesome. So we wanted to talk about a variety of topics. Don't know which order you're seeing these clips in, but the first topic I wanted to discuss, because you interviewed Alex, is the heating up race, the race that's heating up between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Joe Crowley in New York's 14th District. That includes parts of the Queens and Bronx. I did a 4-part series on that race, and what really blew up the other day was that Joe Crowley had agreed to 3 debates with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's the Bernie-crat insurgent, probably the most impressive candidate that I've seen in this entire election cycle, in my opinion. And he went to one debate, the one that was televised on NY1, but he sent surrogates to the other 2 debates, and one of the surrogates he sent was a Latina woman, and he has been complaining that the entire race between the 2 of them has just been about ethnicity and race. Here is what was said in Ryan Grimm's piece in The Intercept. When Crowley talked about the campaign, he shared his frustration over what he perceives to be an inordinate focus on ethnicity. His opponent, he said, was trying to make the campaign, quote, about race, a strategy he called unnecessarily divisive at a time when the party needed to be fighting Republicans, not other Democrats. Very convenient, since he's in a primary race with another Democrat. According to 2 people at the gathering, "I can't help that I was born white," Crowley said. And why that's relevant is because the surrogate that he sent to the second debate with Alex was a Latina woman. So let's talk about the race in general, but also his wishy-washy stance on identity politics.
Right. So yeah, that was, I guess, Brian Grimm did a story that was based on some stuff that was said off the record, and someone there, I think it was at a fundraising event, reported on what Crowley had said, kind of behind closed doors. But it's clearly true because he didn't really dispute what was said. And as you pointed out, it's like, that's so ridiculous. For anyone to say, you know, this isn't the time to be divisive. First of all, you're literally, as you pointed out, it's a primary. That's when you're trying to run against another Democrat, you know, in theory, because you're trying to get the stronger Democrat who will actually defeat a Republican. And of course, what's really hypocritical about this is that basically Joe Crowley doesn't want this to be about race and ethnicity unless it benefits him. So he wrote a piece about why he's proud to be Irish American. So it's, you know, he's against identity politics that he doesn't have, when he doesn't have the identity politics. But, you know, I think that, to be fair, something that, you know, I think you and I are both really critical of is something we could call the weaponization of identity politics. But there's a big difference between identity politics and the weaponization of identity politics. And the weaponization of identity politics really is kind of misusing identity to further positions and policies that are not in the best interest of the identities that they are representing, right? So, for instance, when you just base something on representation, it varies. It can be more or less cynical. You can have someone who happens to be a person of color who doesn't particularly represent the interests of people of color, but more cynically, you can have someone who's a person of color who actually uses their identity to cover for the fact that they're pursuing racist policies.
Yeah, and I think the most insidious examples would be Diamond and Silk or Candace Owens,
right.
You know,
yes.
so
or Clarence Thomas even, right? So Clarence Thomas, I mean, not to age myself, but when he was being confirmed and they were bringing up the Anita Hill charges, and he actually said this was a high-tech legal lynching. It's like the only time he ever mentioned racism was when he was being accused of sexual harassment. Of course, it's a totally unfair, ridiculous comparison, makes light of actual lynching and violence against black men in particular. And he, of course, is someone who, for instance, benefited from affirmative action and then votes against it on the Supreme Court. That's kind of an extreme example. But what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does is that she really represents policies and positions that are empowering and uplifting and liberating for all people, especially people of color, especially women, especially the working class, basically the most disenfranchised people. Those are the people she wants to represent.
Right, and her district is nearly 50% Latina, and
Right.
she is a Latina representative. Obviously, Crowley, who is steeped in weaponizing identity politics, sees this as an enormous threat, in addition to the fact that she's a far superior candidate, in
Right.
my view.
Right, exactly, yeah. So they both do them in separate ways, right? So he does it on his own, as when it's convenient, he talks about being Irish American, but when he's...
Or why you should endorse Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. So why you should endorse Hillary Clinton. So that's really what this is, I think, revealing, is the big hypocrisy around this. Again, I've always said that if you have two candidates and they are the same and have identical policies, and one is a straight white man and one is a straight white woman, or one is a woman of color or a man of color or a straight LGBTQ person, you of course want to elevate the person who is from the less represented community. That goes without saying. The issue is when you have two people and one of them represents policies that are better for these groups, it's a no-brainer to me, which is, of course, why I supported Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's a woman, that's great. Bernie Sanders, for instance, like Fight for 15, which Hillary finally was forced to kind of support. But just as an example, you know, the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage is a women's issue and an issue for racial justice and gender justice, because minimum wage earners are disproportionately people of color and women. So that's just an example of how an economic policy is actually about racism and sexism. And that's as
Right.
important as the gender of the person who's...
And to talk
So-
about Alex's politics and
Yeah.
policy, just in contrast to Crowley, she's for Medicare for all. She's for abolishing ICE,
Yeah.
which is a huge hot button issue in
Yeah.
her district. And right now, obviously, she's for tuition-free college. She's for criminal justice reform, amongst many other things, federal jobs guarantee. She's as progressive as it comes, and she's also wicked smart, and that
Yeah.
comes across in any interview that she does. So
And authentic and passionate.
authentic and passionate. And she's 28 years old. Really my favorite candidate in the race.
You helped. I like to think, you know, it was
was
my
just
interview
us.
with her, and Emma's series with her really gave her that bump that put her ahead.
So really just to kind of button up what we think about the race, since it's going to be on Tuesday, the 26th, I can't believe it. I'm very excited. There's no real polling out right now.
Right.
They don't poll these races unless, you know, I don't know, that someone pays for them. So what's your impression of the race? Do you think Crowley's going to eke it out? Do you think that, because every paper, New York Times editorial board just had a very critical op-ed about Joe Crowley. They said, you know, her shot, it's a long shot.
Right.
You know, I know he's trying to move polling locations, but do you still think she can win?
I think she can. I mean, Move On just endorsed her, right? So we have Move On endorsing her and kind of breaking with the official Democrats on this, the high-ranking Democrats. Ro Khanna had endorsed Crowley beforehand, and then because of pressure from her and, you know, her supporters, he co-endorsed, which was a pretty big, as you know, FU to Crowley in a good way. Right. So he's co-endorsed them. Kirsten Gillibrand, of course, you know, who was so into
Appearing
support,
progressive
yeah, and
now.
supporting women
Right.
candidates and everything.
Emily's List,
Emily's List, which is, you know, Emily's List is committed to supporting women who have a lot of money. I think that should be their mission statement. But they will fund you once you're very well funded.
Right.
But she is supporting, you know, Cuomo over Cynthia Nixon and Crowley over Ocasio, which is interesting for someone who's, you know, wants to change the way the Democratic Party looks and supports people of color and women in theory. I think that she has I think she has a great chance. Again, I don't know the polling. There isn't polling that we've seen. I think that no matter what happens, it's a watershed moment, and it'll be a victory no matter what. She could lose today, and I'm not saying she will, but she could lose and it will still be a major victory, because what we've seen is that things that we would think of maybe as unrunnable issues or positions or unthinkable positions are actually viable. And this is just the first kind of iteration of it since the 2016 election. And, you know, all the elections since have been, I think, proving to people what you can run on, and there are things that we thought would make you kind of politically toxic. So no matter what happens, it's a great sign. She's gotten great endorsements, and I think it'll change, you know, who runs, not just the positions. That's another really important thing, is that, you know, Justice Democrats, brand new Congress recruited her.
Right.
And, you know, things like Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress, which is the post-partisan version of Justice Democrats, and Democratic Socialists of America, these organizations are empowering people who never could have or would have run in the past because they don't have as much money, they're not as connected politically. They're really changing, I think, the face of who is running for office in the country.